Bob Mitchell, who's our guest today, does not really need much of an introduction. He's been producing, well, I was about to say he's been producing the face of the region to the world for about 30 years, but I really should say he had been reproducing the face of the region. His photographs, as you will appreciate when you think about it, have really caught the character of who we are here and presented it to the rest of the world. And so he's become a very well-known personage for his photography, which comes to us in lots of ways. His books, his pictures in numerous family events, weddings, and so forth across the years, his photography logistical support to the books of others, and of course his postcards, calendars, which I think we've all had on our walls for a long time. So what he wants to talk about today is, I think, particularly interesting. I don't know about you, but I tend not to think of photography as having a history, but it does. Technology changes, times change, and in the 30 or 40 years that he's been a professional photographer, it's very clear that the technology of photography, to say nothing of technique, etc., has changed. So we asked Bob to come in and talk to us about, if you want, the history of the last few decades of photography, the evolution of photography, and then to talk about its impact on his own photography, his photographs. So without saying any more, Bob will speak to us for 20 minutes or so, however long it takes him to pass his message along, and then we'll open it up to questions. So if you think of things as we go along, please keep them in mind and you'll get a chance to talk or ask. Bob Mitchell.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. This is nice to see many faces I know and many I don't, so I appreciate you coming out for a sandwich. Oh, did I do that? Did I?
Just a photo.
It's a great way to start. That's how I do it. Bill, do you want to, these prints, just as a little bit of a, to start, I thought it'd be fun to just pass some of them around. Some of the black and whites are, these have been just kicking around the house. You can't hurt any of this stuff. The color ones, these have all been printed with the newer technology, digital camera, digital printers. But they're study prints. I mean, by that I mean these are prints that I make and I kind of just hang around with for a while to look at and decide whether they're worth trying to improve or throw out or whatever. So we just pass those around. Don't worry, you can't hurt anything. Bill and I talked originally about maybe doing some pictures, historical pictures. I've done a lot of photography over the years over in the boatyards. Gowdy and Stevens and so forth from years ago, boats being built and launched and so forth. But then I thought, jeepers, you know, I have half an hour and Bob Rice probably has more old photographs of everything in this universe than I have. I, in fact, have helped him print some of that stuff years ago. He rescued thousands of 4x5, which is what this is, 4x5, which fit inside of one of these cut film holders, that were in the attic of Herbie Douglas's house when Mr. Douglas passed. He had photographed a ton throughout the mid-coast, and they were literally in piles in the attic, and they were being shoveled out onto the back of a pickup truck. And Bob was going by the house, I guess, and saw this, and he decided that he should try to salvage them, and did, and he's worked for years at trying to put them in order and make them presentable for other people to see. So anyway, I gave up on the history of shipbuilding kind of thing in 20 minutes, and so what I thought I'd do is just bring some of my cameras, show you how the technology has changed, and actually I thought that maybe a title for this little talk would be The Making of a Dinosaur. Because I'll tell you, it's been a rough last 10 years. I started photographing, messed with my first camera probably in about 1960 when I was 12. And I brought this camera because this is one of my favorites. It's a film camera, and it was built around that time. This was not a camera that I started photographing with, obviously. In fact, a tiny bit of history about this. I bought this camera from a good friend who taught workshops for Ansel Adams. Ansel Adams actually used this camera. One of his cameras broke, and Bill Buckley, who lives down in Massachusetts outside of Boston, said, Ansel, you can use mine. And I bought this from Bill about 20 years ago. But this camera, this is called a Linhof Technica, built in Western Germany, about 1960, and it's a view camera, as you may or may not know, but it's, I left the lens at home just because I don't like to bounce that around too much, but it's a bellows camera. The bellows racks out, it has all kinds of movements, the back rotates, the front changes, the base plate drops. It's one that can be used to help with parallax and alignment on buildings, and it makes a great piece of film. This is what's called a dark slide. This is a dark slide, but this is a film carrier for the 4x5 film, and that's the size of the film. Probably a lot of you have never even messed with some of this stuff. Some of you I see I see a little twinkle, which means maybe you have, but the great advantage of working with this camera, obviously, is the amount of image that you can get on a piece of film like this, which was during, and even now, I mean, it's still a great tool. Unfortunately, most of the labs that would have processed this film have gone out of business. That was a color transparency, and then on this side I had an old sheet of Tri-X, which is a film that probably some of you have heard of. It's an old black and white. This is just not exposed, but again, and I would process these by hand in the darkroom. So that's back in the 60s. The camera and several generations is still being made, but it's had some fine-tuning and changes that photographers over the years have recommended. But it's a phenomenal. It's a German camera, and the precision of the tooling is just extraordinary. It's a phenomenal piece of equipment, and I'm really quite honored that I have it, and still use it. But you can see it closes right up tight, and you can carry it easily in a backpack, and that's why it was used a lot for outdoor trekking work and stuff. So anyway, that's that camera. So that's a while ago.
How heavy is that? That's heavy.
It's not too bad, but let's see, what did I do? And I wanted to show you, this is another camera that I used this was a heavy duty, this was my workhorse. This is called a Hasselblad. This is not one that most people know of, but it's made in Sweden. Lenses are German again. A lot of the tooling is, all the tooling is European, but the beauty of this camera is that it's just a box, and lenses plug onto the front, and film carriers plug onto the back, so you can preload these with whatever type of film you want to use. Black and white, negative, color negative, color transparency, and depending on whatever use you have for it, you can interchange the backs. You can take half a dozen exposures on a roll, pop the back off, put another back on, and change, so you're doing original work with each film back. And I have probably a dozen of these and more of the cameras than I'd like to admit, but then these guys come off the front, and it's interchangeable lenses, wide angle to telephoto, but a tremendously rugged camera, really well built. And I use this camera and the others that I have for years as a primary camera for making a living. And then, so this was through, I used these cameras and the view, well, I still use them actually. I haven't thrown any away or sold any, but, so that's through the 80s and 90s. And then the transitions toward, well, and I'll go back even a little bit further. 35 millimeter, I used Leicas, which was again a German camera, and then this camera, which is a Nikon F, which was the Nikon's workhorse. I mean, every camera, the Canon had the AE1 or AE2, 3A series cameras, and Nikon's Fs were, again, bulletproof. They were a tremendous camera. You've seen them a lot. Photojournalists of the Vietnam era, people use these cameras. They're just incredibly rugged, great lenses, very heavy, again, for the size of it. But they're metal. I mean, they're really, really well built. They took a lot of punishment, and they have lasted. And the cameras are great. But again, the Hasselblad was that way too. Well, then I'm up into the early 90s. And this is just the camera body. Now this is Canon's. I guess it's a 1, EOS 1D, 1N. Still a film camera, but if you followed my debt service, you would know that it's kind of there's a transition now that's happening toward more automated equipment. The other part of, I don't know if I brought it with me, the other part of those cameras that I just showed you, that I didn't bring with me, is a light meter. Those are all manual cameras. There's no automation about them at all, so I have a little, I thought I brought it with me, and I'm sorry I didn't, but it's a small box that actually reads light, and then you take that information and apply it to whatever you're working with camera-wise and film-wise. About this time, a lot of the automation started to happen. This would have been late 80s, early 90s, where they started using electronics more, built-in metering, autofocus, auto advance. I mean, they still used, you could still get auto winders and stuff for these other cameras, even the Hasselblad. But a lot of the electronics that were beginning to evolve started in the Canon line, started about this time. Again, these were great cameras, and I used them hard, and I used them long. In fact, these were what I used for your wedding, or for your daughter's wedding. This with color negative film. But it's kind of like, it's an interesting thing that happened with camera companies and film companies, although the film companies sort of took it in the neck, but the camera companies they kind of got you in bits and pieces. They started to change the cameras. They didn't do it in quantum leaps because they wanted you to get you a little bit of you each bit of the way, which they were very successful in doing in my case. So this was the predecessor to this camera, which is the only, I mean, you can see the similarity in a lot of ways. One main difference is a little window on the back, which makes this camera, which is film, digital and highly automated. I was trying to explain this to some people one time about how these cameras work, and I didn't go to school for photography. I kind of learned on my own, and in my own simplistic Pennsylvania coal miner way. I tried to explain it as I think of it as a lot of little people inside this camera. And you have a conversation with them. And I say, okay, folks, we're gonna be working in low light, and I'm gonna set the speed at around 400. Do your thing. And so the difference for all of these is that in the manual cameras, your mind, in a lot of ways, was the processor. It was, you had control over how the film was exposed, how the camera was working, and what the setup was. These cameras, if you don't talk right to the people inside, they do a hell of a, they can mess things up big time. They have a mind of their own. I mean, there's settings galore. And for me, early on, when I had to transition to these, and I had to transition to the digital if I were going to stay in business, I had to learn how to talk to these people, and I had to understand what they were saying back to me, because every setting has, I mean, there's so many settings, I can't even tell you. I use some very basic fundamental settings, and I try to understand them well. But if you push the wrong button, and you don't know what you push, you can be a week and a half trying to figure out how to back yourself out of a very bad situation. But if you understand the way the people talk and what they're saying, then you can use the information, because there's microprocessors in these cameras that are just, I mean, this camera was the first digital camera, heavy-duty digital camera that I had. I have probably 4 or 5 generations since then that I've updated to, and each one is more sophisticated. There's a larger capture, there's a faster, what ISOs can go to 6,400 or 12,000 now. I mean, it's unbelievable. But what I had to learn, because of the way I started out with photography, was which of these bits of information can I use to make my photography work for me? And so my understanding of these cameras is very limited in terms of what they're capable of doing. But the other part of these cameras is you got to have a computer. So for me, I mean, when I made a joke about becoming a dinosaur, I mean, I have so many friends, colleagues, people with whom I've worked over the years, and all over the country, around the world, who just said, not going to do it. Not going to do it. I've got $100,000 in camera gear. I'm not going to learn a new system. I'm not going to go out and buy a computer. I'm not going to buy a printer, sell everything, and go to work for a good health care policy. I mean, it's unbelievable. The quality and the quantity, numbers of good people that have just bailed on the system because they can't afford to make the investment. And it's a substantial investment. I mean, when you think about, I worked with this equipment for probably 30 years, the amount of money that I put into equipment as it evolved, and then to have it all one day just say, you know, the end user is what's driving my train. If I'm doing photography for companies, they don't want to hear that I use film, because they've got to convert that to digital files. They've got to go through a whole they want it modem to them the instant that it's made. And that facility actually is available. I mean, I have the capability on a digital camera of making a photograph and having it transmitted to be used as a JPEG file in a publication wherever. It goes over the wire. I mean, as long as you have, it's like using a cell phone, as long as you have a digital for a wired connection or a wireless connection, then you can transmit the information. So, yeah, sure.
Question about that?
Yeah.
Once you put it for publication on the internet, is
Yep.
it part of public domain, or do you have?
It depends on what the publication is and what your arrangement is with them. If you're doing it for hire and the image is paid for and you release your rights, it's gone. I mean, it can be used in any way that any way that they want. It's a very difficult, I mean, there's so much stuff on the internet now, you could spend your lifetime as an internet policeman trying to find out where your images have gone. And even worse than that, because of the sophistication of the software, Photoshop, etc., people who really know what they're doing can take portions of an image and enhance it and use it, and you would never even know that it was yours to begin with, but it can be manipulated in a way that can be made useful for them and whatever. So it's tough. I mean, you can watermark and copyright, and you could spend half your life chasing stuff, you know. I cover myself as much as I can, but there's only so much you can do, unless you have a group of people that are working for you, which I don't, that do nothing but. So anyway, that's kind of where I reside right at the moment in terms of the technology. It is also not only changed in terms of the equipment, but in terms of the quantity of work that I do. Because these cameras now are so sophisticated, so capable of making good images, there is no cost. I mean, except I think I even have an old card that I brought by. You all have these probably, the little memory cards. I mean, that's your film now. And you can take a zillion photographs, process, throw away what you don't want, process or send to a processor electronically what you do want. So it's really, it's changed, which it has good parts to it, because if all of the technical stuff is being taken care of, then people who maybe never felt that they could do photography are freed by virtue of the technology to use their eye and capture images of whatever he or she, they may want to photograph without having to worry about, is the exposure right, is the focus right? It's all done. I mean, it can be totally automated or it can be totally manual. I came up through the totally manual black and white period of the history of photography, and that's what I like to do. But I also have to make a living, so I had, I've learned enough to keep the wolves away, but they're not far away. Because it's just the work, there isn't the work. The economy's tough, people are trying to save money, they get cameras, they do their own stuff, they hire people in-house. So, and that's also why a lot of people that I have worked with over the years have gotten out of the business, because the volume of the work has just gone off so bad. Unless you have a huge name, which I don't have, and then your name on a photograph enhances the saleability of that image or that product, whatever it is that's being photographed, which is nice. I don't know if I'll live long enough to achieve that, but at any rate, so that's kind of where life is for me at the moment. I brought along some prints. Bill has some old black and whites, but these, I thought this was kind of funny. I didn't know what to bring because there was so much, but I will leave these to mess around with. But these are aerial photographs that I made. Yeah. Oh, okay. I can do that. And you can't hurt this. These are old and I have lots of them. I'll go to my grave with these things. But I did print them 3 times, so that was good. But this aerial of the harbor was done in, I want to say about 83. And then the next aerial behind it, the print behind it, was made in about 90. So you can look at different, the first one, the color wasn't great. It was kind of faded and stuff too. But then this was made, those were both with film cameras. And then this one was made with digital technology, and this was made just a couple years ago. So the reason I thought it would be fun for you to see them is that you can sort of look at what's been changed, what's torn down, what's been added. And this one's a broader view of the harbor and out to sea, but it goes from up in the meadow. I actually have aerial photographs, early black and whites that I made when I first came here in the early 70s, mid-70s, where there wasn't anything on the meadow at all. It was a swamp. And some of you have lived here, well, swamp.
Wetlands.
Yeah, the wetland, thank
If we pass these around, try your best to make sure everybody in your area or your row gets
you.
it.
This one's gonna be hard to pass, but I can just stick it up here, and you all can, feel free to look at it, and, handle it. You won't hurt it. And I think I'll quit, and you can ask, if you have any questions. I talk fast, sorry.
No, it was good. Sitting up here moving these cameras around, I can see why Bob's such a well-built guy.
Yeah, and you also, you can't see my doctor bills for the neck injuries and the back injuries.
Could you just say a word? I'm gonna pass these
Yeah,
black and whites
sure,
around.
sure.
Could you just say a word about these?
Yeah, this is Robinson's Wharf, probably back in, this boat belonged to Rennie Miller, and that's actually him at the top of the mast. He was a wonderful, wonderful sailing person. I don't know, did any of you all know Auntie M, Eleanor Miller? Ellen was his wife, and Rennie was, Rennie was a hell of a sailor. And the other thing he had was a Corvair, which I always thought was quite. This is the wind harp in, I don't know geographically, I think they want to call it South Newcastle, but I always called it Edgeville, and of course I was wrong, but it was a large structure which, when the wind would blow, everybody would go up there and smoke pot, and that's what made it famous. That's how I got to know it. Just kidding. Yeah. And this is I call it Uncle Edward's boat. Edward Tibbets, who just passed away, was his original lobster boat over on Little Christmas Cove on Southport. Hauled out just while he was doing some stuff to it.
New Wagon Harbor?
No, Little Christmas Cove down in,
Cove.
you know where I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the green.
You want to say anything about these?
These were the ones that Bill's holding up now. These are prints made with digital technology, digital camera, and printed on a wide format printer that I have. Printed on Epson fine art paper, which is a real heavy paper. Again, they're just kind of study prints, so you can't hurt them. Please feel free to pass them around. One is Hendricks headlight, and
Is there Photoshop, any Photoshop in this one, or is that?
no, that's just, yeah, it was lucky. I mean, I would not be shy to say that 90% of good photographs are, being lucky, having the cameras with you when you see something, This was the moonrise that, it was the closest the moon was in 23 days or something, I don't know. Anyway, it's over Damerscott, or over South Bristol. And then this is just a studio picture of some piers. Anybody have any questions while these are rolling around? Yeah.
The digital cameras do so much. If you make decisions based on what you see on the viewfinder,
Right.
how good is that viewfinder? That little screen doesn't have all the information.
Right. It's a good question. The question was, with the new digital cameras, there's so much information in the viewfinder. How do you really know that what you're seeing is going to help you, and how do you? There's still some interpretation that is warranted, and that's where I said learning how the little people are doing and what they're saying to you. Sometimes they don't always tell you the truth, because depending on where you're focusing, you can get information that isn't really key to the photograph you want to make. So, but that's the beauty of the little card. You make a million pictures and you get one that you like, and you just have to know how to bracket and dial it in and stuff, you know? Yeah, but it's a good question, because a lot of people turn it over completely and then they're not happy with the picture they get.
Would you say, just offhand,
Silly rabbit, what's he doing up there?
would you say just offhand that photography has changed in any way with regard to color and black and white? And I mean here particularly the degree to which you are allowed an interpretive quality.
There's no limit in the interpretive side.
When I
can't do it.
When I started doing photography, blew up my own stuff for the first time.
Right,
Black and white seemed the most expressive because color was so cumbersome.
right.
And now, it seems just passing around these color images, the opportunity to enhance and,
It's endless.
yeah.
I mean, people who understand, who know the software like Photoshop, although it doesn't have to be Photoshop, can do literally anything. I mean, when you look at a magazine, when I look at a magazine today, I am very likely to be questioning the originality of the image. I mean, I think it's all being massaged a little bit. I mean, because it can be. You know, I mean, people want to look as good as they can. I mean, and the technology is available to boost color, to change sharpness, to move heads from one body to another, whatever. It's a sort of an ethical, moral thing. I don't know where the legal parts of all that are, but I met a fellow once in New York who worked for the New York Times, who was part of the very first lawsuit against the Times for an image that was manipulated and changed in a way that misrepresented the subject. And the Times got sued, and he was the lawyer who was defending the Times, and they lost and changed their policy as a result of that very quickly. It's a tough. I don't know how magazines and so forth deal with that in terms of, do they have to get photographers and image professionals to sign something that says, this is a straight photograph. It has not been, because I think they were running into trouble like in, where photographs were being used for evidence in courts, because everybody went to digital cameras. They used to use film. You couldn't mess with that. Well, you could, but ultimately it was a lot harder. Then when you start using digital imaging, and evidence begins to vaporize, something went away that was there because somebody cloned it out or something. I don't know how the legal system deals with that. I mean, I don't. You just have to.
So, and it doesn't make any difference anymore whether it's color or black and white format, really.
Well, no, because the cameras can make photographs in either. You can make a color photograph and push a button and make a beautiful black and white. I mean, it's irritating as hell. Oh, I mean, I can remember struggling for decades trying to make a good black and white image in the darkroom. And now you push a button, it's unbelievable, the quality of the final image. You know, it's just digital. But you can even. Our daughter May lives in New York. And she has a phone that she can take a picture with, and she has on that phone apps that she can choose the type of film she wants it to look like. It could be Tri-X or Plus X or Panatomic, you know, and it could be grainy, it can be contrasted. I mean, and she sends this stuff as an email message, and it's like, oh. And that's all it is. And the phones are fabulous. They have great lenses. Yes, sir.
I saw something pretty amazing the other day. It was a YouTube of a small helicopter drone with a GoPro camera on it. That was following a rowing practice on the
Yep.
Charles River.
Yep,
And it would go under the bridges.
yep.
And it would zoom in on the rowers,
Oh,
who
yeah,
would
man.
look at it and wave or
Yeah.
acknowledge the
Yeah.
helicopter.
Yeah.
And then there would be a still
Yeah,
inserted in the
Yeah.
YouTube.
it's unbelievable.
Do you think that video may kind of take over
Absolutely.
from
Absolutely, it will, because, and that's a great question and an interesting observation, because now the technology, you don't have to have something that weighs 600 pounds, even my digital cameras are heavy. You can do, with mirrorless technology, and I only come to know this a little bit, mirrorless. It's digital, all digital. But the video technology is so advanced now that you can pull individual frames off of a video, and it's as crisp as it was a still. Yes, ma'am.
I have the ability to take a snapshot with
Right.
this $300
Right, it's my
camera.
hair.
So I
I
can.
looked in the mirror, this is a true story. I looked in the mirror this morning and I said to myself, oh, you're letting your hair grow. You know how when you go to, a bald guy goes to the hair person and they always shave your hair right down to the skin. Well, I just let it go and I've got some hair. I'm so excited.
You don't see anything.
You didn't look close enough. Other questions?
Another
That's good.
question here.
Yes,
On the sunset one, or the moonrise, is that just a straight shot?
it is, yeah.
Or that, because it's in the calendar, this year's calendar, I
It
believe.
was a couple years ago, actually, a year or
Because
so.
the horizon is so sharp,
Yeah.
and it almost looks artificial in there, you look at it.
Well,
the foreground.
I will tell you, well, no, that's not true. It's not straight, it is straight in that I didn't do anything but try to make it look sharper.
Better,
The
yes.
reason that I did that was I heard about this moon being close and happening on that particular day. And I said to Susan, my wife, I said, let's go for a ride. I know a place over on the Damerscott. It's up high. I don't know where the moon's gonna come out. I don't know how I mean, there must be something.
There, I know somebody has apps that tells you
Yeah.
that.
I don't know where it is here, and, you know, they can say it's in such and such a east and 5 degrees north, and I don't know where that is around here.
Dave Cleveland's got the program.
Oh, well, yeah, he's got everything, yeah. But anyway, so we went over to this place on King Philip's Trail, and up on a high rise. And I said, well, it's supposed to be at such and such a time, boy, wouldn't it be something? And I didn't even get it out of my mouth, and that thing started to come up over the horizon, out over, that's Thumbtack, thank you. And I didn't even have the right cameras, which is why it's not crisp, real sharp. Because I had an old digital camera with a telephoto. I didn't have my tripod. I sneaked up on somebody's porch and laid it on the porch rail. And that's the picture of it. I only got a couple frames of it.
So this is not your best work.
That's a true story.
I know.
Yeah.
I had-
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a good question, good point though. Yeah, no, I did work on that one a little bit, trying to make it look better than it did, but there's only so much you can do before it starts to it gets weird.
Well, no, I played around because
Yeah,
I'm not a camera buff, but I've got an Nikon camera.
yeah,
But you gotta figure, what's in a camera is more than the first space shot.
yeah,
There is thousands of things in a camera. I mean, and I bought books on it to try to study it. And,
true.
you know, I started even a little ahead of you in
Yeah.
cameras and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm into totally digital now.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
had a Nikon F because I went to Japan on business and brought it back.
right,
And some of my
Right.
old lenses that I had still work on my digital latest
Right.
one. You have to adapt them.
yeah,
Cost you $35 from a guy in Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
But my macro lens was one of my original
uh,
F3.5 55
Wow.
millimeter,
yeah.
and it takes great macro pictures.
And that's part of why I stayed, once I got going with Canon, why I stayed, because when I went to a digital camera, the lenses worked, and I couldn't afford to buy a whole new system,
Oh, yeah.
even if I wanted to go.
Well, see,
to
Nikon's the same way.
Yeah.
They're very competitive. I got
Yeah, yeah,
4 old lenses
Yeah,
that I use on my cameras.
yeah, yeah.
I have some new lenses too now.
Yes.
What system do you use for cataloging so you can find?
That's called look in the box under the bed. I mean, you can imagine 35 years worth of film, and now I'm trying to find it inside the computer. It's terrible. I mean, there are programs. The problem with the programs are, it's just like the problems with the camera. When you talk to the camera, sometimes it doesn't give you the good information. With the computer and me, I am totally not logical. I mean, totally. I've only come to realize how visual I am as a result of being a photographer. So everybody, you know, you get somebody who's a guru with a computer and they sit down at the keyboard and they're, oh man, look at this is great, look at this, you can find this right here. And I'm still trying to turn the thing on, and I don't understand how it works. They say this, and they always say this to me, Mitchell, it's logical. Use your head. Ooh, that's
So,
not a good.
What system do you use? Photoshop or what?
Well, I have Photoshop, but I edit most stuff in Aperture, which is I want to say Adobe. Is it Adobe? Macintosh?
It's Apple.
Apple? Yeah.
Have you ever used Picasso?
I don't know. It's a PC. Are you a
That's-
PC
yeah,
guy?
PC.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't. I just. I don't know much about.
Picasso is very easy. It's very intuitive. I mean,
Yeah,
I use
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Well, no. Hey, I'm not a computer guy either. I admit. I just finally have Lightroom, and I took a class in it. I'm starting to
Wow.
figure that.
Yeah, no, I can't. If I can get a good final product with what I have, I don't change it. I mean, I have my Photoshop is probably a Photoshop 7, but I have it finally after years of messing with an old computer. The Photoshop 7 and the printer, they work together. And if I change one thing, I'm dead.
Yeah.
I can't figure out what I've done, you know.
No, I
so-
understand. I'm sitting.
Yeah.
Let me ask you just a slightly different kind of question about all of this.
Yes.
My former neighbor in New Jersey has a son who's out of college with a degree, smart guy. Seems to be in a good place to market himself for any number of things in the greater New York area. And he wants to go into the professional photography business. And one of the things he has going for him is that he's young and not married. He will travel anywhere to get a picture for somebody
Right,
about something.
Right.
But I would like to know, beyond have camera will travel, what sort of advice would you give to a guy like this
Yeah.
about the profession? Any? It's a shambles?
No, you know, the lesson that I have learned, and I'm probably going to have to be learning the rest of my life, is rest of my life dealing with digital stuff, is the marketplace is the internet. You got to be on the internet like, well, my father used to, I shouldn't know. You've got to be on there.
Yeah.
I mean, you just have to have them. And I have a website, I don't update it. You know, everybody that looks at my stuff says, hey, it's great stuff, Mitchell, but it's 20 years old. Well, it's true. Because I can't do that. And I don't have the money to hire somebody to come in and revamp it and make it all look different every 2 weeks. But they say, everybody that I know that's in the business, that's what you gotta do. You gotta be there, because that's where the shopping, and I mean, it is access to the world. I mean, everybody is on the internet. But that's what I would say, yeah.
And for entering a show, do you also have to use the internet? Or are there still places out there?
Yeah, there are, but there's a lot of action on the internet. You know, I mean, you submit digital files to be selected, and you know, you fly or you don't fly based on. I don't do contests like that. I grew up with a Marine Corps father, and I've had enough criticism. Save the friggin' battleship. So there you go. I got stopped by a policeman one time, and he said, "I know, yes, I'm sorry." It had the Marine Corps sticker on the window of my car, and the policeman said, "You a Marine?" And I said, "I'm worse than a Marine. I'm a Marine son. Don't mess with me, officer." Yeah. There was another question. Yes.
I was just gonna say for your, was it a son of your friend?
Yes.
My daughter does that. She lives in New York City, and she, fortunately, I think she lucked into this in some way. She works for CNET, which is kind of the Consumer Reports for electronics, and she's their in-house photographer.
Whoa.
And she's got a huge studio, all the computer stuff you'd ever need,
Wow.
and her boss is in California.
Yeah.
So she's pretty much on her own, but she also has a wedding photography business, and you're right, she is posting on Facebook and on the internet every day.
Yeah, yeah, and there are all kinds of wedding, I mean, that whole wedding thing is incredible. I mean, it's an industry, there are people telling you how to do everything, I mean, everything,
Yeah.
including hire a photographer. And I want to tell you, some of the lists that people have come at me with, that came printed right off of the screen, I said I'd have to be 5 people to photograph this way at your wedding. I mean, you end up, you have so many lists, you don't pay attention to what's going on, you know, so anyway, that's.
And, never mind, I forgot what else.
Oh.
That's a good song.
There's a whole magazine on wedding rangefinders predominantly. I get it free because I've gone to a couple of New York shows.
Yeah,
And, you know, the big shows to see equipment down there. And
Yep.
somehow I got their magazine and then this other one comes free, but it's,
yeah,
but there's more around the country. A lot of them are teams, 2 people or
oh, yeah.
husband, wife.
Oh, and it's everything, including drones.
Yeah, you have to provide video.
And that's not including the people at the wedding, that's just.
Provide video services.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You take your own photos.
Oh, yeah, man, it's unbelievable. Yeah, you can think of it, it's capable of happening.
Are you gonna tell them about the show coming up?
Hmm?
About the show coming up right here in North Bay Harbor, the main photography show?
Oh, I don't know, I don't.
Okay, I'm in it, that's what I
Oh,
said.
good for you.
Okay,
Oh,
the fellow
yeah.
started 7 years ago, and he just died recently.
Oh, yeah, I knew.
Jim Taliano.
Jim, yeah.
I find out, I used to live kitty corner from where he worked back in Detroit, never knew him. I just found out since he died.
Oh.
Anyway, but the show starts the 13th, a week from tomorrow. It's through May 3rd.
Cool.
It is open to any photographers that live part-time or year-round in Maine.
Hmm.
There's approximately 100 photographs in there. They're outstanding stuff. I mean, I've been going for about 6 years since it started 7 years ago. But like you say, to get anything entered in that show is strictly digital. I
Right.
mean, that's the only way. So that any photograph, and then you print it up and do everything else that way. Tony Sweet is a nationally known or internationally known
Right.
photographer. He's works on Nikon calendars and Nikon publications, a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
I had seen him in New York City 2 years ago,
yeah.
and fortunately I'm in it this year. So
Yeah, great.
Where is it?
it's kitty corner from the library at the main.
Boothby Region Art Foundation.
That's it. Yeah, and it starts a week from there. And I've seen a lot of it already this year because when I entered and stuff. And if you like what Bob does, most of it's like that. I mean, it's nothing weird. It's all electronic, I mean, digital. But it's trees and boats and just a lot of.
I do weird too.
Yeah, this neighbor, he does.
But, yeah, so it's, if you really like photography, to me, it's a great, you've seen it too? Okay.
Yeah.
it's-
When you submit something to that, do you have to disclose that the image has been adjusted?
No, because 2 of my 3 were adjusted. One of them, there's a thing in Picasso where you can go make a colored picture, a pencil sketch, and you can add color back into it and stuff. There's one that I did like that. It didn't make it. And that other one was a straight moon shot, which was kind of a nothing shot. I converted it to black and white. It's kind of really interesting. And then I did some things with color, and it came out kind of very different. The copies of those are in the bins there. So yeah, so I do and I'm not a computer whiz either. And in fact, Dave over here, I took some pictures, we're in the Coast Guard Auxiliary together, and I've given him some stuff of sailboats and stuff where I made in pencil sketches. So, but again, I'm not a whiz. I'm learning slowly.
Yeah.
Finally took a class in it, so go ahead.
I'm just wondering, just hearing the conversation about the manipulation of photographs, if there are people who don't, who
Yeah,
just
yeah.
capture
Yeah.
the image,
Yeah.
because it seems to me it's gonna, you know, for the future, people need to be capturing what's real.
Right.
What, I don't know what the right word is.
No, that's true, and it does happen. You know, in defense of that, just a smidgen, even when I did black and white, you know, I've had that question posed before, and the people would ask, well, if Ansel Adams were alive today, would he, and they said he'd be completely nuts for Photoshop, because he really worked hard.
Right.
And he manipulated his images in the darkroom and chemistry and lighting and color. Even when you made a color photograph, the machinery that you submit your negatives to made some adjustments to, you know, bring things into proper registration and so forth. I don't know where the line is exactly, and you know, but I do know that there are people out there that.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. I should have said that even way back, people were manipulating their images. But what you just said about where is the line?
Right.
When does an image cease to represent
Right,
what it originally was?
Yeah.
It's just an interesting question.
It is, it's tough, and it's not gonna go away.
Yeah.
Because anything can be done.
I just add something. We have a personal friend that's a professional photographer as well. Excuse me. And he takes pictures of yachts and boats with people on them.
Yeah.
And then he sends them the pictures, and then they decide whether they want to keep them or not.
Right.
He took pictures of a powerboat with a fellow on it and his wife.
Yeah.
And the guy said, he sent the pictures all back, he said, the pictures are lovely, he said, but, of the boat.
Not my wife.
But that, that wasn't the situation. He said,
Guilty as charged. I've made the same.
he sent the photographs back because he said, you know, if my stomach wasn't so large. And so they photoshopped it or whatever they did, and took one six-pack off his 2 6-packs. But while at it, they went over to the wife and enhanced her in that place.
Yeah.
They bought tons of pictures.
I made my first error like that was back in the film day. I was doing a brochure for what was then Dougie Carter's co-op over on the east side, and they wanted, you know, it was a perfect opportunity. People out at the picnic table eating lobsters, having a beautiful day, sunshine, clouds. Made the photograph, made the brochure. About a month later, Dougie called me and he said, you know, I got a call from a guy in New York City. And I said, oh, you know, I didn't think anything of it. He said, well, remember that picture you took on the cover of the brochure, the big guy that was sitting on the first bench? He was a lawyer in New York. And Dougie had to give him free lobsters for a long time. Yeah, I was like, oh, I didn't, you know, I never even thought about it. But he could recognize his face, and that's the issue. You know, you've got a copyright issue there, and you can't, if you're going to use somebody's image to sell stuff, you're dead in the water unless you have a release.
I taught at a private school, and that became an issue with images of students that might or might not end up on the website of the school or something like that.
Exactly, yeah, no, you gotta get their permission.
We're running out of time. We have time for a couple more questions. And I have one, but I'm not the audience. Yes?
In terms of preservation, if you have a film photograph or a Photoshop one, which one's going to be hanging on this wall in 100 years?
Photoshop.
Really?
Yeah,
That will
well,
hold up longer to the elements?
yeah, the dyes of early photography are not as stable. Nor is the base, the stuff that I printed on this paper is cotton rag and no pH, no acid. The inks are not inks, they're actually dyes that are, I mean, how do you know? They do accelerated light tests and they say they'll be 100 years before you see any difference. I don't know what it would take to cause them to fade, but you wouldn't want to be putting it on the radiator in sunlight. But these photographs that you see around here, the dyes aren't stable and they will, I mean, even some of my old pictures that I brought in are, you know, they're starting to go by. But they've been in the cellar and the damp and stuff, so.
The digital frame will change every 30 seconds, and you can have 2,000 images in it, and that's what it'll be. They're not gonna have a,
Right,
in a modern,
yes, ma'am.
you see.
And a little more about the
Yeah.
printer that
Yep.
you use to print those on the, you talk artists.
It's, yeah, it's an Epson 7600. It's probably, I don't know, that's been around for almost 10 years, I think. But the inks are archival, I don't remember what old, I think.
They probably get a pretty penny for the,
Oh,
the
please.
ink. It'll cost more than the printer, like
It
regular
does.
printer.
No, I've got, what, 8 cartridges and they're $85 a piece. Yeah.
And the paper's probably expensive too.
The paper is, I think $15 a sheet, 24 by 30.
Yeah.
So that's why these are small, I'll cut them down, and, you know, but it's a magnificent, in fact, one of the sadnesses is they've discontinued the paper. So I've been trying to buy it when I can find it, but it's a beautiful, yeah. And it's got a sort of a special coating to give the color a little bit better.
I know, it looks like it's a
Yeah.
photograph. and it's
Somebody been holding off?
Yeah.
We've got time for one more question.
I'll just tell you one thing, the wooden boat calendar, Mendelis is his
Yes.
name.
Mm.
He, and there's a certificate or something goes that these photographs have not been manipulated, and there's a society or some group that goes on that calendar that he said he does not change it. That's the only one that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Why would you not want to change the pictures?
Well, no, he just says they're straight photographs, I mean, even though they're
It's
digital.
every time you take a picture,
Well-
you know, the condition changes that instant.
But
and
in
you
his-
can't even say,
Is it
you know.
yours? Yeah.
In his case, what he's basically saying with that statement is that I'm so good that it doesn't need to be messed with.
Even Rembrandt changed his things every
Well,
once in a
no, but
while.
I'm being a little bit facetious about that, but he is a very good photographer, and what he wants you to know is that he didn't fiddle with it, you know?
I think it's
Think
just,
of what he could do if he filmed it.
Yeah, right.
I don't think it's a judgment
I
that
think
it's
it's a
good,
jud-
bad, or
No, I don't
indifferent,
think
whether he
it's
did or not, but it's interesting to know.
Yeah,
The wooden boat community and clientele is very picky about stuff.
right, right,
Yeah.
right.
It's funny about Mendelowitz. You know, he's the guy who does the wooden boat catalog, if you don't know. My wife is a rug hooker. She's not here today, so I can talk about it.
So you can talk
But
about it, right, Bill?
She took a picture from a couple of years ago, calendar, wooden boat calendar. And it is a picture in which it's a sailboat at anchor in moonlight, the dark forest behind it. And she did a very nice job hooking it, I will say. But she was having a lot of trouble figuring out the light on it. So we looked at it for a while, and I am certain that he front lit it against the moon in the back. In other words, I would see that as a manipulative step, at least in the sense that it wasn't a natural environment. It wasn't manipulated that I know of in terms of shading or dodging or
Right.
disappearing, yeah, anything like that.
Mm.
And I think one of the things that this is all raised, and if you'd like to give us a concluding comment on what you see as acceptable and non-acceptable. Do you have any sort of limits on what you think is?
No.
Comment on HDR.
No, well, yeah, I one thing that I should really clarify is that I don't particularly feel artistic about what I do. I'm like a carpenter, and these are my tools. And I make photographs, and I try to use the best tools that and unfortunately, my tools are changing, but I don't, it's gonna go where it's gonna go, and it's gonna leave me in the dust, I guarantee you, because I'm a traditional old fart, and it's just the way I like to do stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I still have to make a living, and I will use some of the processes that are available. I'd be crazy not, I couldn't make a living otherwise.
Yeah.
You know?
I guess it's a question of whether or not the art is involved with finding the shot and taking it, or in manipulating it once you get it in your box. And that's, those are clear positions, but I'm not sure, and we obviously have some different.
Everything is organization.
Yeah, I always thought the fun of photography was in the dark room, this is back in the old days, when you got to enhance. I always enjoyed it.
See, the fun of photography for me is finding it.
Yeah.
That's what, I mean, I can't, I ride around the car and look for stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm not very complicated. I have a sandwich by my side.
I think there's an even more basic question that goes with this issue of manipulating or not. Does everybody see the same thing? The red I see here may not be the red you see here. The shading.
Well, that's true.
I
I mean, even in these prints that I've made, they may not be 100% accurate to what the actual image was.
But what you see may not be what I see.
Exactly.
So it doesn't matter.
Who knows? Yeah, that's good.
Okay, we're 5 minutes over. Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you.